Good morning, everyone. We are Parak Mishna Gimel, Chapter 5, Mishna 3. Yimkar Adam es Peirosav, a person may not sell his produce. Yishabo lo'enas hamaisris, once they reach the stage for Trumas and Maisris being separated. Mishenenaman ala Maisris, to someone who is not trusted regarding separating Trumas and Maisris properly. Now, what that means is like this. We have been discussing until now the idea of being kavu ala Maisris, which we have translated as and explained as that the obligation for Trumas and Maisris becomes set to these produce and you can't even snack from it anymore. But there is a point that we have been learning where you can snack, but you can't eat it regularly. That point is called mishaba'u lo'enas ha'maisris, when they have come to the time or to the stage of maisris. That means that when something comes to the point where it begins to become edible, that's the point where it has entered the stage of separating Trumas and Maisris, where we say you can snack, but eat from it. That's a rabbinic decree, not to eat from it regularly once it reaches that stage. That is a stage in which it is That's a stage in which it is possible to separate Trumas and Maisris. If you did it, it would work. From the Torah's point, you're not obligated yet, but the rabbis made a decree that when it comes to this stage of beginning to be edible, halacha is you may snack from it, but you're not allowed to eat from it anymore. This is a stage which we say that you may not sell the produce, even when it is still connected to the ground, but it's already becoming edible, which means that once it would be disconnected from the ground, it would be at the stage of only being able to snap without eating regularly. At that point of time, at that stage, one cannot sell the produce to someone who was not trusted regarding maisris. There were people that were not trusted that they were going to take this produce and separate Trumas and Maisris properly, which meant that you were giving these fruits to a person who's likely going to do the wrong thing. He's likely going to commit a sin with these things. The Torah forbids us. The Torah tells us, do not put a stumbling block in front of someone who is blind. That is interpreted to mean that someone who's been blinded by the desire to sin, one should not put a stumbling block in front of him. Means one should not assist him. One should not give him the means by which to do that. So in this situation, if you go ahead and you give these maisris to someone who you sell these produce, you sell this produce, still connected to the ground, but you're selling this produce to someone, and you want to sell this produce to someone who it's likely will not perform the separation of Trumas and Maisris properly or at all, then that's the situation where we say if it's already reached the point of the stage of Maisris, that point where it begins to become edible, so it's at the stage for separating Trumas and Maisris, then you may not sell it to him. Now, if we were talking about produce that's been detached from the ground, okay, if the produce here was detached from the ground, then the halacha would be that we can't sell it to anyone. The Mishna says you can't sell it to someone who's suspect of not keeping the laws of Trumas and Maisris. Here we're talking, but let's say if we were talking about that it was detached from the ground, then you wouldn't be allowed to sell it to a person unless you sell it to separate the Trumas and Maisris. Because that has had that the person who receives it from you will assume that the Trumas and Maisris have already been separated. That's the assumption. That would be the assumption of a person buying it. And therefore, you cannot sell it until you separate Trumas and Maisris. Here, we're talking about where it's attached to the ground. It's attached to the ground. Where something is attached to the ground, there's no concern. No one's going to think. No one's going to think that you separate Trumas from Maasros when it's touched from the ground, because you can't do that. You can't separate Trumas and Maasros when the produce is still attached to the ground. So therefore, the general concern that the buyer was going to think Trumas and Maasros were separated isn't relevant here because it's still connected to the ground. The problem is that if you sell them to someone who is suspect of not keeping the laws of Trumas and Maasros, and it has reached the point that it's subject to the laws of Trumas and Maasros, which is it's already come to the point of being edible, it's begun to become edible, and therefore regular eating is not permissible, then you may not sell it to a person who is suspect of not keeping the Trumas and Maasros because of the fact that you're now enabling him to do what's wrong because it's like he's not going to do the right thing. Okay, so that's the first part of the Mishnah. You cannot sell the fruits that are attached to the ground once they come to the stage of being subject to Maasros to someone who is not trusted on Maasros. That means that not trusted means that this is someone who, we don't trust him. That means we have reasons to think that he will not keep Trumas and Maasros, and therefore, if you go ahead and give it to him, you could be enabling him. And again, we're talking about someone who's not trusted. That means that we have reasons to believe that he's not keeping the laws of Trumas and Maasros, and therefore, by giving him these fruits, it is likely he's going to not do the right thing, and you will be causing that because you gave him the fruits. Now the Mishnah says the same thing applies v'loy b'shvius, nor during the Shemitah year, l'mishul chashad al shvius, as someone who is suspect on the laws of Shemitah. If there is someone that we suspect that he's not keeping the laws of Shemitah properly, the laws of Shemitah properly means the following. It means that, as we know in the Shemitah year, the ground cannot be worked, and anything that grows on its own has special laws, it has a sanctity, and it has to be treated in a certain way. For example, you can't waste it, and number two, you can't sell it as you would in a business-like manner, whatever the details of that are. But you can't sell in a business-like manner. Now, here we have a person who you are selling these Perish Shvius, you're selling these Shemitah fruit to him, and they have reached the stage of Maasros. They going to become edible. The produce, that which has grown during Shemitah, has all these prohibitions, has these laws applied to them once they reach that stage. So once they reach that stage, you can't sell them to someone who is suspect of not keeping Shemitah because, again, you will be causing him to sin. This will only apply once it reaches the stage when it reaches Maasros. When it reaches the stage for Maasros, that is when the laws of Shemitah about the produce also take effect. Before that, they don't. So that's the same law. You cannot sell this Shemitah produce to someone who is suspect once they reach the point of Maasros. Okay. And over here, there is no difference, I believe, between whether it's still attached to the ground or not. Once it hits that stage of beginning to become edible, the laws of Shemitah apply, and therefore you can't sell it to him because he's suspect of not keeping the laws of Shemitah properly. You're enabling him to do that. The imbikru. Now let's say you've got this produce, back to the produce attached to the ground, and some of it ripened early. So some of it has reached the stage of Maasros, some haven't. You take the ones that have ripened, and you can sell the rest. Meaning, whether it's talking about Shemitah or Maasros, if you have some of them ripening early and some of them are not, and some of them haven't rather, so then that which has ripened or begun to ripen, separate that, take that away, and anything else you can sell to this person, even the person who's not trusted regarding the laws of Trumas and Maasros, or he's suspect of not keeping the laws of Shemitah. The reason for that is because of the fact that being that it hasn't reached the stage of Maasros yet, so basically there's nothing forbidden about this. Before the stage of Maasros, there's no prohibitions when it comes to the produce. There's no prohibitions. This early in the game, the law, it's not subject at all to laws of Trumas and Maasros. So you can even eat regularly from it if you wanted to. So that means that what I am now selling to this person, there's nothing forbidden about it. The prohibition of enabling someone to sin is when you give him something, when you give that person something that's forbidden to them. And therefore we say you're enabling them. So if the produce has reached the stage of Meiseris and it cannot be eaten regularly or already has a sanctity of Shemitah, and you're now selling it to the people who you cannot trust, who are not going to keep those laws properly, then you're enabling them to sin. Where it hasn't even reached the stage of Masris, so there's no laws of Trumas and Ma'aser applying to it yet at all. There's no sanctity of Shmita to it at all. Although eventually it will happen. And eventually they will become edible. They will start becoming edible. They will reach the stage of Maasros. And the laws of Maasros will begin to take effect on them. And the laws of Shemitah will begin to take effect on them. Although that will happen, being that right now it's not forbidden, the prohibition of causing a stumbling block to someone does not apply. So therefore the Mishna says that basically if you've got this produce, if some of it has begun to ripen, take that away. Don't give that to the person who we're afraid is going to sin with them. But the stuff that hasn't yet gotten any law, does not yet have any laws of Trumas and Ma'aser or any laws of the sanctity of Shemitah, that you can sell to him, because right now it's not forbidden, although later on it will become forbidden and he's not going to treat it properly. Our concern is only right now when I'm selling it, right now when I'm giving it to him, it's not called enabling him if right now it's not forbidden. Okay, so basically until now, when it comes to the laws of Lashon Hara, we've been dealing with the introduction. Now we'll begin the actual laws. Aser lesaper b'gnus chaveroi, it is forbidden to tell to tell something negative or derogatory about your friend. Afliu al emes gamar, even if it's absolutely the truth. The mere fact that the truth does not take away from the fact that it's forbidden to say. There may be times that it may be permitted to say, that we will get into. But from the point of when something is considered speaking Lashon Hara, that applies even if it's absolutely the truth. This is always referred to by our sages as Lashon Hara, the evil speech. Now, what it means is we, in a very generic way, use the word Lashon Hara for all bad speech. But technically, you've got Lashon Hara, which is when you speak derogatorily about someone, you say something negative about someone, that's called Lashon Hara. There is, as we will see, and as we have mentioned, something called Rechilus. Rechilus specifically means that you tell someone what someone else said about them or did to them, which they didn't know about. So, or you remind them of it, wherever it may be. But the point is that in a very specific sense, Rechilus is when you tell someone what someone else did or said about them. And Lashon Hara is just telling someone something negative about someone. Because if, let's say, now mixed into a story there are lies, because of those lies, a friend has become defamed even more, who already falls under the category of someone who spreads a bad name, someone who's spreading a false rumor or false news. And his sin is even greater. But one who speaks, Lashon Hara, speaks negatively about someone, transgresses the prohibition, as it states, do not go as a rachel, as a talebearer amongst your nation, which again literally means to tell someone what someone else said or did to them. But this too, the Lashon Hara, where you're just saying something negative about someone to someone else, that also falls under this word of rechilus. This prohibition that we just mentioned, this is Halacha Beis, paragraph 2. What we just read, the prohibition is the specific prohibition against speaking Lashon Hara and Rechilus. But even without this, There are many other negative commands and positive commandments that a person can transgress through this evil speech, as we have previously said in the introduction. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful Shabbos.